without further ado, I'm going to have Rob come up, and he's going to share some great insights, and he does incredible work. So we are very, very fortunate to be able to have him here. So Rob, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Dr. Peterson, thank you for that warm welcome. I have been really excited to come to Arizona, specifically to Scottsdale. We gave a similar talk last year at a school district out here, so I want to thank you all for taking the time to come this morning. I'm hoping that the morning sessions were informative. I know I'll be around throughout the rest of the day, so don't be bashful and don't hold back on any questions. Now, I did want to start off, and I wanted to keep true to my word. I did promise Dr. Peterson, as well as the entire team here today, Princeton Review included, that I would talk about two things specifically. One was, how do we as students and parents actually find a school that's going to be the best fit for us? And how do we as families not break the bank to pay for it? Important issues, yes? Yes. Okay. The other thing that I promised the full team here was that I would try to keep this lecture as interactive and not boring as possible. Keeping true to my word, I am going to start to ask you a series of questions. I will give you fair warning that these questions are going to start off really easy, and they're going to get progressively difficult. Okay? All right. First question. Who here, student or parents, this is the easiest question of the morning, and you could just put up your hands. Who here would say, student or parent, that you are concerned about getting into a good college? Concerned about getting into a good college. Okay, terrific. All right, put your hands down. When you start to think about it, the stakes around college admissions are really high, and whether you decide to move on to a great graduate school after you graduate from college or an exceptional first-time career, hear my voice when I say where you earn your undergraduate degree matters. Second question, also a showing of hands. Who here would say that you're scared, stressed, or a little nervous about the college process? Scared, stressed, a little nervous about the college process. Folks, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. We're going to geek out, and we're going to look around this room just for 2 seconds. Folks, we need to know with absolute, you can put your hands down, sorry. We need to know with absolute certainty that everybody is a little nervous, a little scared, and a little stressed about the college process. You are absolutely not alone. We're in a unique position at the Princeton Review. I get to spend my time, a great deal of my time on college campuses, but I get to spend a great deal of my time talking to college-bound students and their families. And we've been conducting a survey at the Princeton Review for the last now 10 years consecutively. The survey is called College Hopes and Worries. And we found out, we had a little over 14,000 college-bound students and their families complete our survey this past year. And we found out that students and parents are united in one thing around the college process. And that one thing is their biggest worry around the college process. 14,000 college-bound students and their families agreed that their biggest worry, was that students would get into their first choice schools, but families wouldn't be able to pay for it. Understandable, yes? Yep. That same survey of those 14,000 college-bound students and their families revealed that 89% of that cohort said that financial aid was going to be very necessary or extremely necessary for them to afford school, and a full 94% of those 14,000 college-bound students and their families said that they were either stressed or very stressed about the college process. And folks, if you take one thing away from today's discussion, you need to know that that needn't be the case for you. There are, without question, amazing resources that you have in your high schools through your college and guidance office. There are some exceptional tools out there. Wearing my sort of big boy publisher hat at the Princeton Review, there are some good books out there as well. And if you will indulge me for 2 seconds, I will just tell you a little bit about the Princeton Review. I've been a Princeton Review soldier for many years. We started our company in 1981, so we've been around for a little over 30 years, helping students master the SAT and then very quickly the ACT, and now every standardized test under the sun, AP exams, subject tests, and of course every graduate school entry exam. We are 4,000 teachers at the Princeton Review, all of whom would pack up and go home if the only thing that we could do for a student and family was to get them a great score on the SAT and ACT. Our partnership, and this is why so many of us have been at Princeton Review for so long, is much deeper than that. If you take an SAT or ACT course, I would love for you to sit in one of my classes. But the truth is that even if you decided not to do that, it doesn't really matter. I want to make sure that we are completing the circuit by making every student and family that thinks about going to college the most savvy of college shoppers. And we take those numbers that we got last year. Last year we worked with 1.4 million kids. For those of you who've been knocking around the higher ed process for a long time, you'll know that 1.4 million kids is 1 out of every 2 students who applied to college last year uses our Princeton Review services, whether that's a classroom course, online course, website, books, blah, blah, blah. And we want to make sure that we're taking those folks very seriously in completing that circuit of making them savvy around testing, financial aid, and of course college admissions. I will get off my soapbox on that side. I do want to find out who is here as well. Could I see a showing of hands if you're a senior or parent of a senior? Senior or parent of a senior, okay. How about juniors, parents of juniors? That's probably most everybody, yeah. Okay, how about anybody younger, sophomores, freshmen, parents, okay, terrific. Anybody younger, any middle schoolers or parents of middle school? All right, very well done, well done. I say it's well done mostly because last year, that College Hopes and Worries survey, we asked folks that were going through the college process last year, what is the one biggest piece of advice that you would give to college-bound students going through the process this year? And overwhelmingly, their strong opinion was that you should start the college research process as early as possible. So those of you that have younger families, well done, well done. I did write down a couple of the other words of wisdom from college-bound students and their families. Start the process early, we got that one. Research, 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 it's never gonna kill you. This one is relax and try to enjoy it. And this one I'm going to read verbatim. Let your parents help, they may actually know something. Folks, today we are going to take this advice and guidance to heart, and we are going to talk about a great many things around the college process. How do we intelligently and substantively talk about the college research process? How do we think about preparing ourselves for tests? How do we get our college applications together? How do we dismiss and diffuse some of the craziness around financial aid? And most importantly, how do we as an enlightened collective think the same way that college admissions counselors and committees are going to think when they start to evaluate our applications as students? Fair enough? Yes, okay. I promised our team before I came today that I would tell you 2 secrets today that you were going to hear nowhere else in the college process. Here is my first secret. Every student in this room can go to a great college, have a successful future, receive an excellent education, but it all depends on one thing. And folks, this is the one thing that so many well-educated, thoughtful, well-intentioned students and parents get wrong. And folks, they get it wrong right up at the beginning part of the college process. Here's what students and families get wrong. They think about the college process in the wrong way. They think about the college process as a game of winners and losers. If one of our college-bound students in here gets into one of these top 5 schools, then they won. But if the rest of us, 100 or 150 students and families in this room now, get into any of the other nearly 3,500 four-year colleges in the US alone, then we lost. Folks, we have to know that there is a better and a more successful way to go about the college process. I believe that that process can be exciting and enjoyable. I believe that it doesn't mean it's not without work, but it doesn't have to be a process that's riddled with fear, that you're going to fail if you don't get into one of these top 5 schools. While I have you for the next 20 or 25 minutes, I need to know, are you willing to think differently about the college process? Are you willing to think differently about the college process, yes or no? Yes. If you are truly willing to think differently about the college process, I am going to tell you 2 facts about the college process that you're likely going to hear no other place. First fact, ready? First fact, it has never ever been easier to get into college than it is today. Second fact, it has never ever been harder to get into college than it is today. Who is this guy? How do we hire this guy to come up here? How can it both be true to be incredibly easy and incredibly hard at the same time? Folks, we're going to try to prove out my completely unscientific theory together. Fair enough? Here is the exercise. I'm sure you got some Princeton Review propaganda as you walked in the door. You can take out a piece of paper and a pen. You're not going to be handing this in. You can tweet it to me. You can type it into your smartphone. It doesn't matter. This is not to be handed in. Here is the exercise. For every student in the room, I want you to write down the names of 3 colleges or universities that you would love to see yourself as a college freshman, with these 2 caveats. First caveat. I don't care if you don't have a prayer in heaven to get into any of those 3 schools academically or 2 nickels in the bank to pay for them. So it doesn't matter about academic admission, it doesn't matter about financial aid. Parents in the room, I want you to do the same exercise. I want you to write down the names of 3 colleges or universities that you would love to see your son or daughter at as a college freshman. Doesn't matter about academic admission, doesn't matter about financial aid. I am going to give you 27 seconds to write down these 3 schools. Go. 27 seconds. Folks, there are no wrong answers. These schools can be public or private, large or small, urban, suburban, or rural. You have 11 seconds. They could be, they could be single sex, they could be military academies, they could be for-profit schools. Doesn't matter. Nothing is taboo. 4 seconds left. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Keep your pens in your hands. And I want you to cross off the following schools. I want you to cross off every Ivy League school. Oh, it's rough. I want you to cross off the following Arizona schools. I want you to cross off ASU, U of A, and Northern Arizona. And Prescott, just for giggles, just for giggles. I want you to cross off the following California schools: UCLA, UC Berkeley, USC, Pomona. Stanford, of course, oh my word. How could I forget? We'll leave California. Fair enough, should I pick another California school, Elizabeth? Which one? Shout it. I said UCLA. UCLA, USC, UC Berkeley. We'll move on. Let's pick the following. We'll hit a couple schools on the West Coast: University of Washington, University of Oregon. Let's hit a couple schools in the Midwest: University of Chicago, Northwestern. A couple schools in Texas: UT Austin, Texas A&M. Let's hit LSU in Louisiana. Hit a couple of Florida schools: University of Florida, Florida State. A couple of New York City schools. We already got Columbia because it's an Ivy. NYU. We'll move on from New York City. Georgetown in DC. American and GW. A couple schools in Boston: Boston College, Boston University. We'll hit one other Jesuit school. We'll hit SLU, St. Louis University. Pencils down. I would like to see a showing of hands who still has 3 schools left in their list. Guy in the back. Okay. All right. 2 schools left in your list. 2 schools left in your list. All right. 1 school left on your list. Folks, we have a problem. I'll remind you of the exercise that we talked about at the beginning. It has never been easier, it's never been harder to get into college today than it is today. We've proven this out. It has never been easier to get into college because there are literally 3,500 four-year colleges in the US alone, but it has never been harder to get into college today because we are all applying to the same 20 schools. Folks, we named no more than 20 schools. I don't even think we made it to 20. here's the thing. Let's redeem ourselves. Let's talk about why those particular 3 schools made it onto our list of consideration. Showing of hands. You put one of those 3 schools or those 3 schools on your list of consideration because that school has an excellent academic reputation. This is easy. Excellent academic. Okay, hands down. Because a family member or guidance counselor had suggested that school to you. Yeah, that one never does so good. Yeah, all right. Because it's a state school and you were assured you'd be showered with financial aid, showered with money. Yeah? Okay, no, that was good. Because it had offered a major or program that you wanted to study. Major or program, okay? Because of its location. All right. Because of its size of the undergraduate student population. All right, terrific. Folks, these are all excellent reasons in figuring out if a school is going to be the best fits for us. And we should know with absolute certainty that some of us as students and families are going to apply to those 3 schools, and you're without question going to be admitted to the 3, and it's all going to be great. But folks, I know with the same certainty that so many of those 3 schools on all of our list of considerations are not going to be perfect fits for everyone in this room. And we know with absolute certainty that smart and accomplished students actually get rejected from colleges each year. To understand that, we as a collective, we have to understand what it means to be a selective college, we have to understand why colleges are selective, and we have to think about how colleges are selective. Can anybody define for me what it means to be a selective college? We throw these terms around all the time. What does it mean to be a selective? The pithiest definition, the most simple definition of what it means to be a selective college. You could just shout it out. What does it mean to be selective? Not everybody gets in. Any dissenters? Anybody else? Well done. Well done. Not everybody gets in. I completely cheated and I put my quick definition here. A selective college is a college that accepts some students and rejects others. It's the same thing. Why are colleges selective? I think lots of families and students believe that some schools are selected because it offers a more competitive degree or better professors or more rigorous majors, and that may or may not be true for some of the schools that made it onto our list, but it is not the reason that schools are selective. The reason that schools are selective, very clearly put, is that some schools have the luxury of most schools have the luxury of choosing a small freshman class from a very large applicant pool for that freshman class. Folks, selectivity has everything to do with the size and the quality, the academic quality of the students applying for seats in your freshman class. If only great students apply to this school over here, that school is always going to admit great students. And if only average students apply to this school over here, that school is going to admit average students. We should know absolutely, with absolute certainty before we leave, selectivity has everything to do with that freshman applicant pool. But where it gets interesting for folks like me, and I know folks like you, is how colleges are selective. This is another shout-out answer. Can anybody name for me the #1 most important piece of information that any student will submit on their college application, and it doesn't matter if you're applying to a public school, private school, large, small, urban, suburban, or rural, it doesn't matter. What is the #1 piece of information that any admissions counselor or committee is going to focus on as the primary driver of your application? Shout it out. What is the #1? Test scores. Essay. GPA. Your transcript. Anybody else? Without question. Again, before we leave this room tonight, several people hit on this, your GPA and your high school transcript. Folks, when we think about it, although we are smart, well-intentioned, well-educated, we all get confused around the college process. But before we leave today's sessions, we will know with absolute clarity the order of importance that admissions counselors and admissions committees will place on different parts of our application. Without question, your high school GPA, your high school transcript is the most powerful document because it answers this question. Did you challenge yourself in high school? Did you challenge yourself with regular level courses, AP level courses, advanced level courses, IB level courses? What were the opportunities that you were given academically? Did you take advantage of those opportunities? And then, of course, what was your GPA? The most revealing document on your application is going to be that transcript. Okay, second most important thing. So we have transcript #1. Shout it out. Second most important thing on your, on your application. Test scores. Anybody else? Essay. For the majority of schools, always test scores. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, specifically for the SAT and ACT for standardized tests, to a lesser extent, subject tests and AP exams, although incredible values. The SAT and the ACT, and you will hear nothing really positive from me, specifically around the College Board that creates the SAT. I've been teaching the SAT since the tail end of the Reagan administration. It has been a really long time. And I'm finally getting a lot of the questions right. But the SAT particularly is such a deeply flawed exam. It's an incredibly coachable exam, which is good for students, but it's an incredibly flawed exam. So why would an incredibly flawed exam, and we all know the answer here, but we're going to make sure that we all shout it out, why would an incredibly flawed exam be so powerful as the second most important thing on your college application? Because it's standardized, yeah. So I went to school in New York City, you guys went to school in Arizona, you went to school in Chicago, you went to school in DC. The likelihood that we all had the same opportunities, that the community outside our high school was the same, that the academic offerings were the same, would be nil, right? So the value of a standardized test, SAT, ACT, AP exam, subject test, whatever it might be, is that we are all put on that one scale, as flawed as it is. Interesting things going on the SAT and ACT. I'm hoping that we can kind of geek out and talk about those things later. For those of you who are in the class of 2016, right? For those students, 2016, the SAT is changing, and right now the ACT is taking a ton of share around from for the SAT. I'm happy to talk about the business side of both exams or both exams themselves. Okay, so we beat those 2 points down. GPA and transcript, standardized test scores. When you start to think about it, admissions counselors are all interested in bringing in a class who is interesting, who is talented, that is diverse, and I don't just mean ethnic diversity, I mean students that they are bringing in their freshman class who are diverse in their interests and their passions. So what are the other things that we have in the admissions arsenal to make sure that we're bringing in that wonderful and interesting and compelling class? We said a couple of them. What are the other pieces of application fodder that you'll be sending in that are going to be next important? Essay, terrific. So I came here on the plane last night. I was thinking about, well, what are the typical essay topics that students have? Those of you who are seniors this year will be familiar with the Common application. I was looking at the Common App on the plane. And the Common App has several different choices that you can choose from for your personal statements or your college essay. One of which, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, one of which says, in 500 to 750 words, please sum up your passions. Whew. Folks, that's a hard essay topic. It's a thoughtful essay topic, right? It's thoughtful, but it is so open-ended that it sends shivers of fear through any student, whether you're 16 or 86, whoever's looking at it. But here's the thing about the college essay. Your college essay is such a unique and singular way for you to describe something that you love in high school, academically or outside the classroom, or that you incredibly dislike in high school. Folks, there is no perfect canon for your college essay. You have a unique opportunity to talk about something that will either augment what admissions counselors are seeing in your application, or completely lead them down another route that describes something about yourself, something that you like or dislike. Folks, there is no, again, perfect prescription for a college essay. However, college essays must do two things. The first is that they must communicate intelligently. Folks, there is no reason for poor grammar or poor punctuation on an essay. We should know this absolutely with certainty before we leave today. We have to have great editors on our college applications. We have to be fearless in asking for that editorial help once you create your first draft of your essay. Fair enough? Yes. Okay. So we have GPA, we have SAT scores, ACT scores, we have essays. What are the other things in the admissions arsenal that we can pull out to find out if we're bringing in interesting and talented students? Your interests, your activities, yes, your extracurricular activities. And I was giving a similar talk to this a couple weeks back, and I had a great family that had come up to me at the end, and they were convinced that their daughter had to have this list of 11 different activities for her to be worthy of any college that was going to entertain her application. And 2, that that list of 11 had to be uniform for all students applying to schools. Does this sound correct? Is there a canon list of extracurricular activities that we all must follow? No? Yes? No, of course. Again, smart, well-intentioned, well-educated families often get tripped up around the frenzy of college admissions. Folks, extracurricular activities should be absolutely unique to our interests. There is no particular list, there's no particular number. We need to be different. And we're talking about why here. We're talking about why admissions teams are going to want to look for those wonderful individuals. And those list of extracurricular activities is just one way to do it. The last thing on my list, and not every school grants you an opportunity to have an interview, but in any iteration, if you are given the opportunity to interview with the school, whether that's with the actual person that's reviewing your application, with the student representative while you're on campus, here in the Scottsdale community for a school that might be in Boston or New York City with an alumni representative, folks, you should take advantage of any and every opportunity that you are given to interview to strengthen your application. You cannot miss. Any of these recorded actions that you're doing with the school are all obviously recorded, but they can all strengthen your application and gauge your interest for the school and gauge your process of finding that that school is or is not a good fit for you. Take advantage of those opportunities. So when we start to think about it, those admissions counselors want to make sure that they're bringing in that freshman class that is the right amount of actors and scientists and athletes and students from first-generation college families and students from international experiences and students from public and private and parochial schools. They want to make sure that they're bringing in that class that has those diverse interests as well as those diverse backgrounds. And when we start to think about it, admissions counselors at schools large and small are all charged, well, they are all incredibly savvy folks, right? They are charged with incredibly weighty tasks. Admissions counselors at schools large and small are charged with the task of reading and evaluating thousands of different high school transcripts and reading and evaluating thousands of different college essays and personal statements. But folks, at the end of the day, all of those admissions counselors, and I don't care what college you're from, are all asking the same question. And that question is, will you as a student make their community better for being there? Will you as a student make that community better for being there? Nowhere in that statement does it say that we as admissions counselors are hoping to penalize a student because they didn't get a B+ in chemistry and they don't have the right amount of soccer prowess, right? What it says is that we as admissions counselors are looking for students who will truly complement our college or university for being there. Folks, when we start to think about it through that lens, we know that the admissions process is much more than just selectivity, right? It's more than selectivity, and that selectivity becomes, in many ways, a human process for you to intelligently navigate. And my job at Princeton Review, and all full team's job at Princeton Review, and your entire guidance and college counseling staff in your local schools, they are charged with one task, and that task is to make you, students and families, truly, truly experts when it comes to college admissions. Truly the most savvy of folks shopping for colleges. Those of you who are seniors in the audience, this might be slightly redundant on what you know, but has anybody actually been to a college fair? Been to a college fair? Raise your hands. Okay. All right, so a few people have been to a college fair. This will be redundant. College fairs are set up there. They're sometimes as few as 25 colleges if they're hosted at your local schools or school districts. Sometimes then there's a huge national fair in Phoenix, and there'll be as many as 400 different colleges represented. And you'll see some of the college representatives that we saw when walking in to the auditorium here. There'll be table drapes and lots of admissions collateral and a very handsome or beautiful college counselor behind the table, right? And then every admissions counselor, they're actually folks who have been to a college fair. What happens 2 weeks after you exit that college fair? Emails, snail mail. Folks, you're going to get bombarded with information from that school and every different channel because you filled out a little contact card for that school, and you will be completely contacted by that school for the next 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is when you interact with them, which is very good. When you start to receive information back, and your college offices at your local schools are riddled with these, does anybody know what the Grail is? What is the most important piece of marketing collateral that an admissions team will create? You know what that's called? You'll know them as soon as you see them. It's called a college view book. And they're sort of glossy magazines, right? And you open up the pages and you start flipping through it and you see a lot of classes being taught out on lawns. Right? You know. Usually the class is taught under a shady tree with only 10 kids in the class. And perfect diversity amongst all the students. Folks, and I'm an old admissions guy as well, and I'm just poking fun here, but we would be doing ourselves an active disservice if we stopped our research at marketing information printed by schools, as lovely as that information might look. We owe it to ourselves to dig down into deeper research. We understand marketing information, and that has its place without question. But we need to owe it to ourselves, to us as students, to us as families. We need to be able to be smarter about filtering and focusing that information and really looking for the good stuff that's going to round out our opinion. I'm going to come back to this point, but there was too good of an article not to talk about. Last summer, it came out in the New York Times, and it was profiled, and there's been other services like this, profiling 10 different students who had applied to a number of colleges. And I just wanted to just take a straw poll out here. What is the average number of colleges that a student who applied for freshman admission last year actually completed? You could shout it out. How many college applications does a student normally fill out and send into colleges? 2. 5. 7. Anybody else? 10. Oh, it's getting interesting. Anybody else? Real number last year was between 8 and 10. 8 and 10. If you had seen this article, there were 10 students profiled from across the country who had all applied to between 25 and 30 colleges. And folks, if you take one thing away from this discussion today, you need to know that applying to 30 colleges is nothing but ridiculous. Applying to 30 colleges in no way increases your chances of freshman admission to any of those schools, and it does not take the place on what you're doing today, which is the good and substantive and metered research that you're supposed to do. So pat yourselves on the back, you're doing the right stuff. But it's easy to get confused and to fall into that pit of frenzy around college admissions. We know it. I, however, would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I believe that students who are in high school today and who are college bound are so well prepared and prepared in a different way than students were 5 or certainly 10 years before them. Students who are applying to college today will apply earlier. In high school, they will have had more volunteer experiences than students 5 or 10 years before them. They've been involved with more activities. They likely spend less time at home than any other students in history. I'm convinced that that is a mathematical certainty. They are better prepared for college level work. They are more socially engaged. They're more politically aware, and they are more demanding of the outcomes of their college degree than students just 5 years before them. You are asking the questions that students and families thought taboo 5 years ago. You are asking the question, why is college A better than college B? Is it just because of cost, or are there other things that are factoring into the quality of a school, one school versus another? Folks, you should pat yourselves on the back because those are very pragmatic questions that nobody was asking before in earnest. As I said before, we work with a lot of kids at Princeton Review, students and families, and last year was 1.4 million students coming through our queue. And I said before that lots of students and families are united around worries around college admissions. But I believe that so many college-bound students and their families are united in one real hope and goal. And that hope and goal is that students will actually find a school that is the best fit for them. And as I said before, when we were going through that dream college exercise, when we were talking, we put up our hands and we said, That school made it onto our list because it had excellent academic reputation, or majors, or location, or we're going to get a ton of dough, or whatever it was. I just want to make sure, before we start talking a little bit about financial aid, that we checked off all of the things that we think as an enlightened collective are going to lead us to finding a school that is the best fit for us. Did we leave anything out? We talked about some big buckets and their catch-all buckets, but did we leave another big bucket out? I'm sorry, money? Yes. Money, yes, yeah. Well, I wanted to capture that with financial aid, but very, very fair, and we're definitely going to talk financial aid. Here's the thing that I'm driving at, and I'm going to give you a big hint, and I think that you'll probably figure it out from them. If you can tell me why I am not the most popular guy in college admissions, you are going to get this answer right away. Does anybody know that I am not very popular when it comes to college admissions? Although, you're very kind, objectionable, yes. But that's not, that's a nice answer. Although my parents continue to actively deny this fact, I am the guy that writes the party school list each year. Yeah, it's true. Syracuse University, #1 party school in the land, written by us at the Princeton Review, specifically me, because I write this book, The Best 379, whatever. My point is this. The other part of FIT is the qualitative, is the opinion-based stuff, and it's not our opinion. In this way, we're in a unique position at the Princeton Review. Last year for that book, The Best 379 Colleges, we surveyed 130,000 students, and we asked them their opinion, their experiences in lots of different areas on campus, certainly social life. But we asked them their academic experience, their career service experience, their financial aid experience, their social experience, whatever it might be, diversity experiences. So we're in a unique position to ask 130,000 students last year in college, are your professors good teachers? Good question. Do your professors encourage class discussion when they're leading a lecture? Do your professors, are your professors accessible after the doors of class close, or do you never see them again? Do your professors bring the material that they teach in class to life? Or do your professors suck all of the life out of the material that they teach in class? Folks, I am not the most popular person in college admissions because we're listening to whom we would consider the real college experts. And that's not me, that's not us. Those are students that are in school. We're just in a position to listen. We're the messengers. We're listening to these students and taking back their experiences and their opinion and taking that back out there and creating, and I do 62 different top 20 ranking lists, one of which is our best party school. We asked those 130,000 kids about their own experiences at their schools. We asked them how much beer do they drink on a weekly basis, how much hard liquor, how many drugs do they do on a weekly basis, hours of study spent outside the classroom, and then popularity of fraternities and sororities. Those are 5 things that are, call it what you will, but that will indicate in my mind a very active social scene at one school. And I'm not trying to demonize schools. We're writing about the most superlative, the most competitive and awesome schools in the land, but the student that will apply to Brigham Young University with 99% of students whom are Mormon and Vassar College, 2 awesome schools which academically on paper look nearly identical, but are 2 completely different schools that another student, a different student will be happy at one or another, likely. So my long-winded point is that that last part of FIT has to be listening to those experts, has to be listening to college-bound students and their families around FIT, around what their experiences are. I did promise you at the beginning part of our soliloquy here that we would talk about some things around financial aid. And I just want to make sure that we understand the numbers around financial aid. I want to understand those numbers, folks, because I want to very clearly underscore that if we are choosing our college incorrectly at the beginning part of the college process, it is expensive to be wrong. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, but I tell you with absolute certainty, it is expensive to be wrong, to not be thoughtful about the schools that make it onto that list of 7 or 8 or 10 schools that we apply to, and for us to be happy to go to any of those schools. I just want to ask, and we define cost of attendance at Princeton Review as 4 different things. Total cost of attendance of a college or university. Obviously tuition, room and board, fees, and books. Those are the big 4. Does anybody know what it costs on average to go to 1 year of public university? What does it cost? Total cost of attendance, 1 year of public university. Shout it out. Books, room and board fees. 20,000. 22. 42. 1 year public. 28. Real number this year, $18,400. We're going to right around it, right around it. Let's flip to the other side of it. 1 year total cost of attendance, tuition, room and board, fees, and books for 1 year of private university. 42. 55. 62. NYU fan there. Yeah. Real number this year, and you got it right away, it's $39,400. That's on average nationally across those 3,500 schools. Folks, when we start to look at those numbers, and many of us in this room will start to apply to those schools that are far more expensive than the $39,500. We might be looking at the NYUs, the Williams Colleges of the world, that are all well over $60,000 this year. Here are some of the mistakes that we've seen so many students and families make specifically around schools with high sticker prices. And I'll just give a nod to this point and then we'll move on. How are we doing on time? I'm not completely blowing my time up here, am I? We're good? We're good? Okay. When we start to think about those schools that have high sticker prices, what we've seen through the students that have gone through our Princeton Review channel is that students make mistakes early on in the college process, even though they're well-intentioned around it, specifically around schools that have high sticker prices. What we've seen so many schools is saying, well, you know, Williams College admitted 7% of their students last year, but their price tag this year is $59,400, $59,400, so let's call it $60,000. Students will cross a Williams College off of their list of consideration, and here is why that is tragically flawed. It is tragically flawed because Williams, even though you have to be superlative of those 7% of students that it admitted, it is able to meet a student and family's financial need 100%, meaning that financial aid should not be an issue for any student that is admitted. The average merit-based grant, and we'll talk about these numbers for any of your financial aid sessions, merit-based, grant, scholarships, those are the three magic words you want to talk about because that is money that you do not have to pay back. It is not a $1 in loans. So some schools are able to meet that need 100%, where the average aid package from Williams at $60,000 this year is $42,000 on average for grant aid. So bringing that number down to right around the average cost of 1 year of public university, average across the country. I just want you to start thinking a little differently about making sure that the schools that make it onto our list, even though some have high sticker prices, my job at Princeton Review is to dig down into those numbers and find out what the real cost would be for the typical families. Now, some of them are very good, like a Williams, like a North Carolina Chapel Hill on the public side of the fence, awesome. But some schools will look at what the average freshman grant is, what the average sophomore or senior grant is, money you don't have to pay back, what the average loan is for those same students and families, and then what the average debt load is. What debt load are you likely to graduate with after 4 years at this school? Folks, you will never, ever see that in a glossy view book. You're never going to find it. And it's difficult to find. But that's our job. That's not your job, is to figure out how to get to that curated information and then choose to do with it as you will. But it's our job, because we're in a unique perspective, to not only listen to students, but to collect a ton of quantitative data from schools, particularly around financial aid and everything else, to make sure that you're given that stuff. Okay. The most important application, obviously, that you're going to fill out next year or whenever you apply to college is going to be those 8 or 10 schools of college applications. But really, the second most important application from the other queue is going to be your financial aid information. The FAFSA form, the acronym stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. You guys all know this. It will be the weightiest form that you will fill out in the coming year or years. It is weighty because that FAFSA form unlocks the majority of financial aid dollars based on a family's need. The FAFSA form, and then its sort of twin form, is called the CSS profile for some schools, and we can talk about those things privately if you wish. But the FAFSA form unlocks nearly 50% of the aid that typical families will receive when going to college. So 50%. I just want to make sure that we know where the other 50% is. There's a 45% block that comes from somewhere else. Can anybody name for me where that money comes from, typically? Endowments, okay. I think you're probably right around. Scholarships. Yeah, it comes from scholarships, comes from endowments. It comes specifically from, what I'm hearing is from the schools, right? Okay. So when we start to think about it, 45%, 50% is going to come from the government, 45% is going to come from the schools themselves. And the schools themselves money is generally giving out in two ways. One is based on need, but the majority will be based on academic prowess, how competitive you are in two things. And when I talk to high school students, they ask a lot of questions on what they should be doing to get scholarship dollars for college. And what so many students think that they should be doing is looking for one magic website or a 12-volume set of scholarship books where they can apply for outside scholarship dollars. But the truth is that less than 5% for the typical student and family are funded by outside scholarship dollars. You know, sort of these one-year scholarships that students will look for. So folks, you are much, much better off to do two things when you are in, well, really one thing when you were in high school, which is to be an awesome high school student. And that is going to happen in two ways. One, you must try to be superlative in the classroom. You have to be. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you must, for those schools that are looking at the SAT and ACT scores, which is still the majority, much the majority, they're looking at how well you did on standardized tests. Folks, there's not a lot of alchemy here. You know, I mean, it's how well you did in high school, how well you did on standardized tests to unlock the question of selectivity as we were talking about. But that also is going to benefit you again. It's going to benefit you because you will receive a great deal of scholarship dollars for the majority of schools. Now, there are schools like Williams, as I had mentioned, that does not offer merit-based money. So they don't offer merit on how awesome you were in high school. They'll admit you on those points, but they will not give you scholarship dollars. But for the majority of four-year colleges that we will be applying to, they will offer scholarship dollars. So being great is going to benefit you in two ways: academic admission and, of course, financial aid. I told you I'd break a couple taboos, and then I'm going to be quiet up here. We have seen this happen at other students make mistakes around college. I outlined 4 of them, and I'll just quickly give a nod to them. I know this is never going to happen for anybody in this room, but it has happened to students before, and I'm just going to give a nod to them. Getting your hit list together. Here's the biggest mistake that we've seen students in the past make. Applying to a school because your boyfriend or girlfriend decided to go to that school. Applying to a school because everybody in your family since the beginning of time has gone to that school. Applying to a school because it is hard to get into. Applying to a school because it is easy to get into. Folks, we need to know that we need to be smart about the process. That's the whole point of today's discussion. We have to know that whether we apply to 7 schools or 10 schools in the next year or years, that there is no reason that we should not be tickled right down to our toes to go to any of those schools that admit us. We said before there's 3,500 four-year colleges, and that's a conservative number. If we're applying to 7 of them, there is no reason that we shouldn't be ridiculously happy at any of those 7. Our job upon exiting this room and through the next year and years is going to be to find those lists of 7 or 10, right? And to be happy about those schools academically, campus culture, financial aid, career services, all of those things. So our job is great, and this is what is exciting to me. I want you to be as excited about that. You can do this yourselves. I know without question we're going to be there to support you, and of course your team's here as well. Thank you for being so attentive. I so appreciate it.